Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell. You'll get a notice anytime we upload some new content. And when I'm not asking Bruce, hey, how big was Batista's? Well, you know. One of the things I like to do is help people save money. And if you're watching this video right now and you're in a 30-year loan, man, you're overpaying your single biggest bill and you may not even realize it. I want you to do a little experiment for me. Take your calculator out, multiply your monthly house payment by 360 payments. That's how many payments there are in a 30-year loan. That big scary number, that's your total of payments. You're looking at that number? You know you can do better. Keep more of your own money right now and go to savewithconrad.com. Or maybe you've got credit card debt. Man, it's not a matter of if I can save you money with that. Your average interest rate on a credit card is more than 20%. And by the way, all the interest you pay on those credit cards, it's not tax deductible. Whereas the mortgage interest, well, that is tax deductible. So if you owe this debt, it's up to you how to pay it back. Doesn't it make sense to get the cheapest rate possible and the greatest tax deduction possible? Find out how much money you can save right now for free at savewithconrad.com. You don't need perfect credit. Even scores in the 500s can be approved, and it's no cost out of pocket. But maybe best of all, we're licensed in more than 40 states. We can help more families than ever before. But how much can we save you? Find out right now for free with a quick quote from savewithconrad.com. Hey, it's Conrad Thompson, and you're listening to Grilling JR with the voice of wrestling, Mr. Jim Ross. Jim, how are you, man?
Couldn't be better, Conrad. Great to hear your voice. Great to rejoin our fans here on the Ad-Free Network and beyond. Good show today. One of my favorite guys. We're going to talk about bittersweet story, but there's a lot of good parts to it as well. But like you said before we started taping, you kind of always got to just, what if? Of course, I'm speaking about Magnum TA today, and so it's all good. Hey, by the way, how's everything in the mortgage business?
Everything in the mortgage business is great, Jim. I appreciate you asking. Of course, we can hook you up too at savewithconrad.com. This is indeed buying season. Lots of folks are out buying houses and looking for a new crib for their family just in time for summer vacation, and kids can start school in the new school, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, cruise on over, savewithconrad.com, and I'll even get you a little summer break from house payments. How about that?
That's not a bad deal. And the thing about it is that I know inventories are challenging in some parts of the United States, real estate inventory I'm referring to. And so these lower interest rates give you a little bit more wiggle room to make close those deals.
Yeah. What we're talking about is you get more house for the money. You keep the same great payment, but you get a much better house as a result. So why not? So take a look, savewithconrad.com. And we're taking a look at one of the greats today, Magnum TA. And of course, don't forget Dynamite. You want to talk about Dynamite, man? You guys had a Dynamite show this past Friday, and boy, we were off to the races, and it feels like we're in for a string of big shows coming up.
Yeah, a lot of big things are planned. Tony Khan's really got some amazing creative thoughts going forward. We have goals and destinations. And why I say that is that it used to be, and if you think about it this way, it makes all the sense in the world. If you know your destination, you can adjust your route. You can make stops at Buc-ee's. You can make stops at the 7-Eleven or at the QT, not QT Marshall, but a real QT, but you're still going to the same destination. Watts used to book the Mid-South territory around 3 or 4 major events a year, and so he would book the blow off. For example, let's say a Thanksgiving night spectacular in the Superdome.
Right.
He would book his main event. He would know the finish months before they had their first match. And so then he had a map. He created his own road map. The destination was Thanksgiving night in the Superdome. Now, how best can we facilitate this creative journey to sell more tickets? Because there was no pay-per-view and all that stuff. If you didn't sell it, your money was made on ticket sales.
Right.
Put in the old proverbial ass every 18 inches, as we like to talk about. So, or at least I do. It's a fun thing. Put an ass every 18 inches is a fun deal, man. I think our kids at AEW had a little bit of I don't know what the right word would be to use, maybe hangover after that huge crowd we had at Daly's Place, which they were out loud. And it's amazing how loud they work on Conrad, because there's just a little covering, a rain covering on that facility.
Right.
It doesn't capture all. It's an amphitheater, so it doesn't capture all the noise. So a lot of noise, went up in smoke, so to speak. So anyway, but that's the deal. Tony's doing some really cool things, and I think the fans are going to be really excited about where we're headed and who's going to be traveling with us and all those things. A lot of big matches are being built kind of slowly. That's kind of how we do things. It's not like you shoot an angle in the first part of the show and you blow it off at the end of the night.
Right.
I don't think wrestling fans really truly appreciate that, even though some younger fans might say, well, I'm impatient. I don't want to watch a 1 hour match, whatever it may be. And I don't know if I want to watch a 1 hour match either, unless it's good.
Right.
If it's good, feed me some more of it.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to feed you some more Magnum TA today. How about that? One of the all-time greats, Terry Allen, and what a story he's got. We're covering him today because tomorrow is his birthday. Born June 11th, 1959 in Chesapeake, Virginia. Magnum begins his training and career based out of Championship Wrestling from Florida around 1978. When did you first hear about Terry Allen or the Magnum character? Was it based in Florida, or once he's working for Watts, is he on your radar?
Well, he was in Florida, and Cowboy and I would look at tapes, Championship Wrestling tapes from Florida, because Eddie Graham or whomever the booker was at that point in time was always trying to do talent trades, keep your roster fresh, bring in a new face, a new opponent for one of your top guys, whatever it may be. So we would look at these tapes, and Terry Allen always stood out because his look was amazing.
Right.
He's 6'3", 6'4" guy. He had a great symmetry. He was athletic. He looked real. He didn't have his body shaved. He didn't have a zillion tattoos. He looked very natural and real. And Cowboy loved the realism. Plus, he was a good amateur wrestler. He could take care of himself. But there's where I first saw him. I didn't even hear about him. But then Bill and I were talking one day about, I just got the phone with Dusty. We're going to bring this kid in. He's really high on that. We're going to give a run as a babyface, Terry Allen. And he didn't have the Magnum TA name at that point in time. I think he got Magnum TA from Cowboy or Cowboy's wife or somebody. He was very popular with the female audience. And obviously I know it's almost mundane to talk about, and maybe morbid for some people, but Dan Conrad, that was part of the babyface's job description, was to appeal to the ladies.
Of course.
And whatever that term may take on is what you're expected to do.
Well, let's talk about what's next for him. I think everybody knows that he really made his name in Mid-South Wrestling. In 84, he's renamed Magnum TA. And of course, a lot of this is based on his resemblance to Tom Selleck, who then had a hit TV show. And this is before everybody had cable. This is before everybody had, streaming services, and TV was sort of the bee's knees. If you were on network television, boy, you were something else. And Tom Selleck was the guy, riding around in Hawaii in his badass ride. He's Magnum PI. So I don't know that everybody maybe put that together, because I even was explaining that to some wrestling fans, I don't know, earlier this year. And they're like, what? It was based on a TV show? Because these days people would say, oh, that's hokey. But somehow Terry Allen pulled it off. Magnum TA was pretty fucking cool name, huh?
Yeah. It's a different generation too. People looked at things a little bit differently than they do now, with less, in a less cynical vent,
right,
shall we say.
Sure.
But Terry did look like Tom Selleck in Tom Selleck's role. The mustache was the giveaway. And of course his name was Terry Allen. So Magnum TA, Magnum Terry Allen, was a cowboy thing. And, Bill was good at that kind of stuff. So, among other things, creatively. So, that's how that name came about. And, luckily it stuck, and it wasn't forced upon the public. The public kind of said, okay, that's cool. I get it.
Yeah.
And they went along with it.
When do you first remember meeting Terry Allen?
I met him, I think, the first time when he came to Cowboys office in Mid-South to get started. Moving there and getting settled and moving to the territory. I think he probably lived in Louisiana. Most of the guys did. And nice kid, he's very personable. He was good looking in person as he was on camera. He's in great shape. Very impressive. He's one of those in the cowboy rules. If he walked through the airport, Conrad, you would notice him.
Okay.
If not, your wife would. In all due respect.
Is that a cowboy rule of thumb? I mean, we've heard that with Vince McMahon. I didn't know that was Cowboy's deal too.
Absolutely. He was always looking at people in the airports, Cowboy. So we saw a guy walk through the airport one time, started about 5'10", maybe less. Had these giant quads, these huge thighs. And Cowboy said, he's been doing squats. Just out of the blue. So, his wheels are turning.
Right.
Is this kid? So if the kid had come over to Cowboy and introduced himself, he might have got an audition someplace in time.
Wow.
Because that's the look that attracted Bill out of that crowd of people in the airport. So if you turned ahead in a crowd of people, as in an airport, then that you moved up on the list. So that's what it was all about, recognition and remembering somebody. But Terry's the kind of guy that had that great look. The hair was perfect. Mustache was on point. He was, he could have been a matinee idol. I don't know what his acting chops were, Conrad, as far as a Rocky type actor,
right?
Dwayne Johnson type, but he had the look. No doubt he had the look.
Talk to me a little bit about, when you first become introduced to him. This is a different time for wrestling. This is very much the territory era. Guys are going to come in and usually have a start date and an end date. Did he have an aspiration to really dig his heels in with Bill? Was Bill bringing him in saying, okay, we're going to give you 6 weeks, and then it just worked out and he stays on?
Long term. Bill had seen enough tape. Bill had enough conversations with Dusty about it. And Dusty was always Magnum's mentor. A lot of Terry was around a lot of great talents, including your father-in-law and others who could teach him a lot, help him a lot. But Dusty was his guy. And Dusty and Cowboy had a great relationship over the years. Bill's the one that gave Dusty the nickname, the American Dream, and turned him heel in Florida, or turned him babyface. So they conversed a lot, booking ideas, shooting a breeze, lying to each other about caught the biggest fish yesterday or something. Or the OU Texas game was always a topic of conversation that usually ended up with a great deal of profanity and money's waged that were never paid. Those some bitches made bets on that game every year, and I don't know if any money ever changed hands. I'll get you next time. I'll see you down the road. The same deal. They worked each other, but they also saved their money.
Right.
So in those days, when a kid would come to the office, I might be asked to kind of go over our schedule, our routine. We had a routine. Every Tuesday, we were in Shreveport to shoot the interviews to the local markets, the local towns, selling local tickets, and do those for several hours. And then every other Wednesday, we would go to the Irish O'Neill Boys Club on the fairgrounds there in Shreveport and shoot Mid-South Wrestling, 2 one-hour shows. Now, that was our routine. And around that, we had a live event schedule. And the talents wanted to be on those live events because they didn't get paid one dime for television. Nothing. So, and the guys that were on the north end of the territory had to get down to Shreveport on Tuesdays. And the guys in Shreveport, no matter where you're booked, if you're booked for interviews, you got to be there on Tuesday, no matter where you got to come from. So I explained all that crap to him and just got to know him a little bit better because I'm going to be interviewing him and we're going to be doing features. And Bill really wanted to push this kid. And the plan was for us to keep him, get him hot, get him over, help us draw some money. And then when it was time for him to go back to Charlotte, which was always the plan, to work for JCP, then we would be given ample notice. And generally on a top guy leaving a territory, you wanted the perfect window keep a booker owner happy was 6 weeks on a top guy. So if you're a top guy and you would have been a top guy, Conrad, boom, there you go, and you're leaving to go someplace else. Well, I'm going to keep you 6 weeks while you work your way out. And we can maximize your stay here. We can maximize you being over and draw some more houses that, by the way, you're going to get paid for.
Right.
So that's kind of how that was. And I know he's a college educated kid. I think he went to Old Dominion. Magnum did, I believe, and smart kid, well educated. He had good parenting. All those things you can feel in those conversations. And it's better than somebody telling you how their last stint in prison was.
Chat me up a little bit about, the relationship. We've talked about the fact that at this point, Watts and Graham and everybody's getting along and blah, blah, blah. But when you've got a talent like Magnum TA that a lot of people think, man, this guy he could be the guy. There has to be at least some hurt feelings somewhere along the way when a guy like that is moving from territory to territory. Is there not? Or is there always the hope that, well, it's just temporary, he'll be back?
Well, yeah, it was all planned out. I mean, he wasn't surprised that when he got to Oklahoma, oh, by the way, you're going to stay here a year.
No, I mean, in terms of Eddie Graham, was Eddie frustrated or disappointed?
Eddie was done with him.
Okay.
And Eddie may not have seen the magic in Magnum TA that others did. I'm not saying he didn't, but he made Magnum expendable and wanted somewhere for him to go. And Dusty and Jim Crockett were not ready to take him. They didn't think he was ready for their level at that time. And Cowboy had a little different coaching style. He's a little bit different of a teacher and a mentor and all those things. So the plan was all along, we've got this great kid. He's been trained down there with Eddie, and Eddie Eddie wants us to take him, but I don't think he's ready for us. I thought maybe you could help him. And Cowboy had familiarity with Terry Allen. Said, hell yeah, let me get my hands on him, see if I can't help him learn a few things and put him with veteran heels that know how to lead him and help him tell a story. So that was always the strategy. Maybe the only thing that wasn't nailed down, Conrad, was when Magnum would be returning.
Right.
But we always knew that we'd have at least 6 weeks to prepare for his departure, and probably more, quite honestly. So that's how that worked out. Because you keep the positive relationships going with the company. Magnum comes in here and becomes a big star. He leaves, gets on TBS, becomes a bigger star. So when he comes back to our territory for a special one-night deal or big show or something, Christmas night or whatever it may be, that helps everybody. So that's kind of how that went. It was a different mindset. And, at your age, you're a young guy, you're living in a different mindset as far as wrestling is concerned than it used to be.
Right.
Back in the proverbial day.
So let's talk a little bit about Andre the Giant. The story is supposedly Andre the Giant is the guy who combines the Magnum name with the initials of his real name, Terry Allen. Do you remember hearing that maybe Andre would be the guy? Because it's fascinating. Like when you talk to a guy like Arn Anderson and he says, man, Junkyard Dog is the one who suggested that I looked like Ole Anderson. And then of course, when he met Ole, he had heard, hey, they got a guy coming in who looks just like you. I'll be damned. You do look like me. Now your name is Arn, and ta-da, Arn Anderson's born.
Yeah.
It's fascinating to me that JYD named Ole Anderson and perhaps Andre the Giant named Magnum TA.
I don't know the answer to that. Is it possible? Heck yeah, it's possible, because obviously when Andre spoke, everybody listened.
Of course.
He was the boss. So I don't know the exact origins. I'll tell you this, someday if you ever talk to the Cowboy, there's your answer.
Yeah.
He'll know, because he really spent a lot of time molding and managing Magnum to only let him do things he was good at doing, and to not overbook him with somebody that's going to eat him alive to get themselves over.
Let's talk a little bit about the performer Magnum TA. A lot of our younger listeners who grew up with you on their Attitude Era WWF Monday Night Raw shows, they never really got to see Magnum. And you've described that he's a good looking, handsome kid. He wasn't shaving his body. He wasn't trying to go with that bodybuilder look everybody else had in terms of being sleek. But he did have that thick Tom Selleck style mustache, very popular with the ladies at the time. But as far as his promos and his work, could you describe him and maybe make some, characterizations to more modern talent that some of our younger listeners may be familiar with? Like, oh, he wrestled a little bit like this guy and he had promos like that guy type of thing.
I got it. You're not talking to Silva here.
Yeah.
Bull Ramus Jr.
Thankful for that.
I'm trying to think in today's world. He was the old school people would say he was a rough baby face. Because his body was not in the traditional babyface mold. You know, everybody had to be hairless and all that good stuff, which he wasn't. He reminds me now a little bit of a Moxley, just that he can wrestle, but he chooses to fight more often. Magnum's delivery on his interviews was very intense and very focused. And I think that's kind of like his work, intense and focused. He had that intensity that a Stone Cold had as far as having the passion and makes you believe that he came to fight, he came to represent us, whether he's going to say it or not. And this guy's a star. But he every intangible in every generation that I've been a part of, Conrad, since the 70s, he would have checked the boxes for. He could work babyface or heel. He could work with anybody, athletically. You believed in him. He could go out and have a match, a bloody street fight with Bruiser Brody, just as easy to go out and have a 60-minute draw with Ric Flair. Very versatile, very intense. And that's what he brought with him every time out. So he became very reliable in that regard. And then all of a sudden, the people believed in him. We did a couple of angles that helped facilitate that. I'm sure we'll talk about, but people started believing in Magnum TA, and he was a beloved character.
Do you think Magnum had any weaknesses? You've talked a lot about his strengths. When you first see him, sometimes you see talent and you say, man, this kid's got something. If he could, when he ever decides or when he ever figures out blank, he's going to be somebody. Did he have any weaknesses when you first saw him?
The only thing I saw Conrad was inexperience.
Right.
Sometimes the hesitation on what to do next.
The transition in between spots, you mean?
Yeah. And that became simply a fait accompli, because the more ring time you have in front of a live audience, the easier that situation is to address. So I would only say, gosh, I'm just thinking inexperience is the only thing I can think of. I mean, he had the body, he had the look, he was athletic. I believed he was a tough guy. I believe that. So he broke the traditional not centuries, that's exaggeration, but decades old scenario of what a babyface normally looks like.
Right.
Ricky Steamboat. You look at Ricky Steamboat, well, that's a good guy. And Ricky's what we talked about. He didn't have hair all over his body. He didn't have any tattoos.
Right.
It's a different stereotype.
Right. And
Magnum destroyed that stereotype, which I think for a lot of the boys that have followed him that are not have the traditional baby face bodies or look, that he gave them a boost. He helped them.
Let's keep it going here. Let's talk a little bit about working in Mid-South in this era. You and I have talked about it a little bit, but we haven't spent a ton of time discussing what the inner workings of the territory were like as far as the day-to-day life. But I've recently been fortunate enough to talk about that with Arn. We're going back through Arn's entire career, sort of week by week, even day by day, breaking down all of his opponents when he's in the territory system and just what living on the road was like back then. And he describes working in the Mid-South Territory in a word as brutal. Just the travel between towns. It's not a tiny territory. You're covering a lot of states, a lot of real estate, a lot of miles, a lot of wear and tear on your car, a lot of 2-lane roads. And he described it as being so challenging that having one spare tire wasn't enough. You needed 2 just in case.
That's funny.
Tell me about, what you remember hearing and experiencing when you're having to sort of run these roads as well.
Well, Arn's right. I mean, it was brutal, but I bet you in the same conversation, he told you how much he learned there.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
And the foundation that was set forth that he built his reputation and his legacy upon. Arn got a lot of, I remember when Arn came in, Marty Lundy, it's under the old quote unquote underneath heel.
Yes.
So that means prelim, kids, prelim villain. But Cowboy liked Arn from the get-go. He saw Arn had a great work ethic, just old school, down and dirty, nothing pretty, bullshit. Just down. It was reliable, and that's my number one trait.
Oh yeah,
I look for it. Reliability, man. But the road trips were what they were. I'll say this: when I was a referee and I was on the road, the same highways, the same towns,
yeah,
doing the same trips, except I wasn't doing it for the same money. So for a referee, you got less shekels to go around, and you can try to get something home for your significant other to go to the mall on. That's another story. I could tell a bunch of those son of a bitches. But yeah, it was challenging, Conrad. It was challenging, but what ideal territory was there?
Right.
They all had trips.
Yeah.
You didn't ride on an airplane. You went in a car. And some of them were brutal, no doubt about it. But I think the trade back is, and I'm loyal to Mid-South, as you can tell, and because that's where I got my start.
Sure.
But, working for Cowboy wasn't a day at the beach like I have now here in Jacksonville. It wasn't a day at the beach, so I paid my dues as well. But Arn's exactly right. I don't disagree with anything he said there. It was brutal. But with that brutality became the secret to a lot of the finer points, the fine art of what we do. And I can promise you that my announcing would never have achieved the level that I hope it does eventually if it hadn't been for Cowboy teaching me the psychology of the wrestling business.
Talk to me a little bit about what the guarantees were. There weren't any, in a word, as far as I know, but it feels like these days, of course, the hot buzzword is, what's my downside guarantee and guaranteed contracts. But back then, what you're guaranteed is, hey, we're going to book you on a bunch of shows and go get over. But as far as the actual creative and certainly the financial piece, that's based on, what we see and what happens and how we're drawing, et cetera, et cetera. Or when a guy like Magnum has a little bit of footage under his belt, does he come in with a bit of a more firm guarantee? Magnum
may have had, like some of the guys were beginning to have at that era, a weekly guarantee. But if you didn't have that kind of deal, you're an underneath person, or like Arn probably. You're working for what they pay you. And generally, now there are going to be exceptions. You can ask him about this on his podcast. I recall certain parts of that Mid-South journey that I was on where the underneath talents got a minimum of $40 a day, and the guys the next level up got 60.
Wow.
And if you shared a car, the baby faces and heels could not ride together. If you shared a car, the guys in the car with you in your vehicle paid you 2 cents a mile for transportation expense. And if you didn't want anybody to ride with you, then go by yourself. You ain't forced to ride with other people, but you can make 6 cents a mile if there's 3 other guys in there. And then you just do all the math, and that buys gas and stuff like that. So, but it wasn't good money. You went there to learn and hopefully create a skill set that is marketable based on Cowboy's philosophies and his teachings. And a lot of guys did that. I mean, there's story after story of guys that came through Mid-South, including Arn. So, like I said, but he's right, man. It was brutal. And that was always the biggest complaint that I heard. was travel. Travels, some of those trips are just unconscionable, really. I mean, I remember getting booked and doing a referee gig in Mississippi, like maybe Greenville or Greenwood somewhere, then driving to Oklahoma to do Oklahoma City on Friday night. It's an all-night drive to go make my $40.
Yeah.
So when others say, have so-and-so really paid their dues? Just peel back that onion a little bit with a paid in full right beside all of them.
Talk to me a little bit about Bill's opinion of Magnum when he sees him. Did Bill think Magnum was TV ready? You sort of said a minute ago that you felt like he needed a little bit of work with the in-between stuff, the finer points, the transitions and whatnot. Did Bill think, for the most part, hey, this kid's TV ready?
Well, his look was TV ready.
Yeah.
His look was TV ready. The consensus was he just simply needed a little bit more time to get his game under him. We're going out there doing a lot of tape television. We're not stopping and redoing things. We're not doing 2 takes. You sink or swim with what you're sink or swim with what you're doing. And so you got to be pretty proficient, at least know what not to do. And that was where Bill helped, I think, Magnum a lot, was just don't go here, don't do this, don't do that. Just take that out of your game for now. and then the time to try it is the live events, not on television. I stand by that rule to this very day. You don't try something new on TV.
Right.
It's illogical. But anyhow, yeah, Bill always thought Magnum had the look. I mean, that's the one thing that drew him there. We didn't know what kind of human being he was. We didn't know if he had the aptitude. You come to find out he's been a fan all his life. He's influenced by the genre. And so the genre then has a special place in his heart, and he stays motivated to excel within that chosen genre. And so Cowboy, we all got to learn that real quick, that we got a fan on our hands, and he's going to invest time. He's a student of the game, and Cowboy loved that aspect of anybody that would put a little time, extra time in to learning the arts of their craft.
Well, very quickly, we're going to see him get the old-fashioned push, the almighty push. Magnum wins the North American heavyweight title from Mr. Wrestling number 2 on May 13th, 1984, which is really Magnum's first major title. Do you remember this event?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, that was we did a big program. We had Magnum, and Cowboy came to me one time and he says, I'm going to put Magnum and 2, talking about wrestling 2 together, and as a team, and give him a run with the Midnight Express, probably a title run or something. And he said, then I'm going to break them up, and I'm going to make Magnum a heel. I said, I think that's backwards. He said, what do you mean? I said, well, first of all, Wrestling 2, who I had great respect for, but he was a lot like Red Ass JR sometimes, except he was Red Ass most of the time. I said, he don't even want to sign autographs or take pictures of the fans. He's not a babyface, Bill. He don't want to be a babyface. He's 50-something years old. So you think Magnum? I said, Magnum's a guy. So Cowboy booked this angle that Midnight versus Magnum and 2, and the losers had to suffer 5 lashes with a leather strap from the winners, including Cornette. But if the baby faces won, then Cornette got the lashes as well. Obviously, that's not what went down. The heels cheated, they won, and they had to take their lashes with that leather strap, bare-backed. And Wrestling 2 walked out on Magnum. And the referee was kind of verklempt, didn't know what to do. And so Magnum stepped up and said, I'll take all their lashes. Now, that was great. That's a John Wayne move and a half, I promise you. That's great booking. Except the guy that's booking it wasn't taking the lashes. And the fact that we were doing that same angle in every town. And they're losing in every town. They're getting lashes in every town. So about the third day, Magnus looked like he'd been, accosted on a dark street. His back was hideous. His danger of getting infected, staph infections, all that stuff. So they finally did a little angle where they had Terry Taylor come to Magnum's rescue and volunteer to take lashes alongside of him, which made Taylor a more of a baby face. And of course, Magnum, we just put his toughness over. And yes, when he came on television, we took great close-ups of his back. It was sickening. And we made some more heels. I mean, we made heels out of the more stronger heels with the Midnight. So that little angle right there really, and it made wrestling too a villain. And he loved being a villain. And it made Magnum this courageous baby face that had bigger balls than the law should allow.
Mr. Wrestling 2, obviously a big, well-respected name in the wrestling business. The reason for the transition here, we're just trying to put over the bright, young, upstart babyface, or is Mr. Wrestling 2 going to venture off into the sunset and try a new territory? Or what do you remember for the reaction that Mr. Walker had to this changing creative?
Well, Johnny was getting older. He lived in Atlanta. He had bought a lot of property in Hawaii, and here he is working the Oklahoma Mid-South territory. I think he was ready to start winding it down a little bit and start getting booked closer to where he lived and eliminate some of his travel. Cause like I said, somebody will Google it and they'll have the right answer. So they can go online and correct my ass. I don't care. I just want you to know I don't care. Correct me if you want. I just think Johnny was about ready to go, and Bill had kind of gotten all the juice out of that fruit he was going to get. So I think it was kind of a mutual thing. And, but I don't know that leaving was a well thought out plan. There's generally some sort of cash and creative issue there. So, but I just think it was time for him to go, and he'd served his usefulness. He'd made some money, and off he went.
Tell me a little bit about how Magnum felt about winning a belt like this. Not only is it a big belt in Mid-South, it's literally a huge belt. I guess we should talk about that. The North American heavyweight title, Bill Watts, I guess, secondary belt, is a gargantuan monstrosity of a championship belt, right?
Yeah. Don't you own that?
I do not, but I know who does.
Oh, they're in danger. Get on, Connie. Close.
I'm on it.
The boys used to kid that Watts got that belt so big because it would cover up his belly. I never heard him telling that to his face, but I've heard that chit chat in the O'Shower area. That was a very distinctive belt, and I think that was other reason, seriously, that Bill wanted to be bigger than the other titles, figuratively and literally. And so it was up to the territory and the right champion and the right matches to make it that way, literally or figuratively. But literally, there you see it. It looked like a hubcap for a goddamn 18-wheeler. It was huge.
It's gigantic.
Gigantic, Conrad.
Is he, is Magnum excited about having his first major championship?
Like a kid in a toy store. It wasn't I said this in the Bret Hart documentary. I think I did. I know I said it somewhere along the way that, the greats never looked at their titles as a prop.
Yeah.
And, I don't think Magnum ever really looked at championships as a prop. Even though we all knew what they represent and all those things. But I think he was like a kid, that was a big deal, man. You're a fan all your life, Conrad. You're a fan all your life. And you finally get into a territory. You're on the main TV show. You're a star of that show. And now you're the champion of the territory. That's a pretty damn good little deal for a kid that got featured out here to Oklahoma, as a favor to Dusty to get him ready for Dusty and to Dusty's booking. Because everybody had already, there was mumblings always there about how far this kid can go. And every booker, no matter what generation or whomever it may be, always looking for the next big thing. And if they're not, they're going to go out of business. You have to continue to look for the next big thing. And a lot of people thought that Terry Allen was the next big thing. early on.
So how's he acclimating to Mid-South? I mean, obviously he likes the push he's getting, but he's running with a new batch of characters, and I'm sure not everybody's tickled that he has leapfrogged some of those guys along the way, and he's making towns up and down the road, left and right. That's going to wear anybody down. How's he acclimating to Mid-South, do you think?
The main thing is he has to acclimate to the travel, and I think he did a pretty good job of that, but fatigue set in oftentimes, and more often than not, instead of having a systematic way of giving talents days off, giving them a notice, most wrestling offices would ride you just as far as you could be ridden, until you raise your hand. And, so sometimes the talents will go to Bill and say, I need, some of the smaller clubs, he might take them off those. So they could rest. But travel is always going to be the enemy in that territory. It always was, and always. If it was offering today in the same pretense, where it's all car trips, it'd be the same thing. So the travel is always going to be his biggest enemy, and getting some time off to let his body rest. Those simple things mean an awful lot to a talent.
Magnum holds this new championship for 5 months before dropping it to your old great close personal friend, Mr. Ernie Ladd, on October 16th. Ladd would defeat him in a title rematch the next month. And it feels like this might be Magnum easing out of the territory. What do you remember about this match with Ernie and Ernie coming out victorious?
Well, Ernie was Bill's guy, and my guy too, for that matter. And Ernie was the booker. Everything ran through Cowboy. He vetted everything. But they did that either daily on the phone, and then they did it when we'd meet on Tuesdays. I got to sit in all those booking meetings with Ernie Ladd, Bill Watts in Shreveport, writing the next 2 nights of television. And then I would, that was on Tuesday nights. We did that because during the day on Tuesday, we do the interviews and talk about the interviews and who's doing good, who's got a good promo, blah, blah, blah. How can we make this better? What have you? So I got to spend a lot of time with Ernie. Ernie is a safety net. First of all, people still believed in Ernie, especially down in that part of the woods. And he had great respect from the fan base. He'd been around forever. He was Ernie the Big Cat Lad, whose feet covers the ground he walks on. I'd rather fight a man and what do you say? Well, I'd rather fight a man than kiss a baby. You crazy bastard. But so that was our day on Tuesday. Here's our day on Tuesday, Conrad. Interviews from about 10 until about 2, maybe 3. Food. Booking meeting. Cowboy gets sleepy. Ernie wants to play dominoes. So we go to my room. I always had a room on the lower floor, same room. And we would open the patio door so we could smoke. And brother, did we smoke. And so me and Ernie would play dominoes sometimes till the middle of the, seriously, 3 or 4 in the morning. And it was very competitive, to say the very least. But I knew when to do my job so I could finally get Ernie's ass to bed because he wasn't going to leave on a downward note. So somebody had to do the honors, Conrad. I manned up. I did it. I threw the domino game just to get a little bit more sleep. So, but it was what a fun time to be around. And Magnum helped make it that way because he helped make business better. But Ernie was a safety net because Ernie could work babyface in some towns, but more naturally as a heel in most towns. So there's a lot of ways to book Ernie until Cowboy made this decision who was going to be Ernie's successor.
It's been said over the years that Ric Flair essentially became like a low-key recruiter for Jim Crockett Promotions. As he's working as the world champion, he's of course living out of Charlotte, North Carolina, but the NWA world champion is booked all over the world. So he gets to see talent far and wide. And allegedly he's responsible for helping recruit the Midnight Express and Rock and Roll Express. And before you know it, even Magnum TA is leaving to go to Jim Crockett Promotions. And it happens not too terribly long after Ernie Ladd is victorious. Do you think, and again, I'm asking you to remember something from, 40 years ago. Was Magnum giving notice here something to do with Ric Flair if you had to go back and play detective?
Probably not. I think we again, there was a game plan in place. Had nothing to do with Rick. Nothing. And Rick, the Midnight Express, and all due respect to Nate, they weren't a secret. Everybody knew how good they were, and everybody also knew how unhappy they were working for the Von Erichs. So, and that was a no-brainer. I mean, I would suggest to you that probably JCP was the designated or preferred spot of a rival for Midnight Express, if you ask them back in those days. So, but Rick was in a perfect position because he commanded and still does so much respect, and he's laying eyes on so many great talents that something's bound to stick. So that was a kind of a nice little perk that Crockett had, as long as Rick was the traveling champion. Rick got to give him the feedback on a lot of really good talents over the years, I would assume, or who not to take. Could work both ways. All that information is viable.
Do you think that, there was still stuff to be done with Magnum in Mid-South, or did we squeeze it all out? Did we get all out of Magnum we could have in Mid-South?
Probably not. Probably could have gotten more. Longer reign as the champ. Getting him officially in place to the level that you would be bringing in heels to build underneath him, so that he would have an ongoing flow of fresh opponents. But that was not the deal. He's going to be here for X number of time, and I think that was the only thing I could say right now that would be somewhat of a mystery. Was that 6 months, 1 year? Probably going to be if I had to guess, he's probably going to be there a year. How long was he there?
Well, I mean, less than a year, and he's out of here. But here's the thing. It is the territory days, and there's not another way to say this. By late 84, Mid-South is perhaps not as big as maybe they once were, but Jim Crockett Promotions is definitely the NWA territory to be a part of.
Correct.
Because they've got the Saturday TBS slot and all that jazz now. So things are looking up if you have an opportunity to go work for Jimmy Crockett, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And, I don't know that Cowboy and myself and others did a great job in preparing for the future, replacing some guys that were leaving. Again, it was no surprise that Magnum was going back to Crockett. The plan was that. And there's this old school wrestling promoters keeping their word, which is very rare. It probably wouldn't happen in today's world, because nobody trusts anybody.
Right.
Everybody's got an agenda. Everybody's got internet influence. It's bullshit. And luckily back in those days, we didn't have the internet. We didn't have all those things that allow people to say things that weren't true and could be as hurtful as they chose to be. That's what being on what's it called? Social media.
Yeah.
That's what that's all about, in my view. And I am a crotchety son of a bitch. Why do we have so much trouble in this world understanding that if you can't say something good about somebody to some degree, for God's sakes, everybody's got redeeming social qualities, Conrad. Hell, even me and you.
Yeah.
You just have to look for them sometimes.
Yeah. Sometimes harder than others. I misspoke. I guess he starts in late May of 83, with Watts. And I think he finishes up on, December 5th, 84. So he makes it about a year and a half there.
Yeah. That's about right.
And, then before you know it, he's popping up, around Christmas time for, Jim Crockett Promotions, and he's off to the races. And that's happening, of course, in December of 84. And when we first see Magnum debut on TV for Jim Crockett, it's a video montage set to the song Born to Be Wild. And Tully Blanchard is the first to begin the challenge Magnum, saying, "Pretty girls and working out in the gym don't win matches." Tully was the perfect heel for a babyface Magnum, was he not?
Yeah. Tully was they created magic. And you know, you can also say, well, that was great booking, and it was, but the guys that you, as the booker, you envision creating this scenario of effectiveness and marketability have got to execute. And you got a kid that's just getting started. He's taking great steps forward, but he's still got a long way to go on his journey, referring to Magnum TA. And then you got the guy with a PhD in being a villain, Tully Blanchard. So underrated.
Yeah.
You know, if I were those kids at AEW, and maybe they do, and I'm not paying attention as much as I should, I'd be picking his brain at every turn in the road. If you're a wrestler, maybe face or heel, because you got to understand the inner workings of both to be effective at one or the other. And Tully was just, he was on a different level. And they knew, they meaning Crockett and Dusty, that if they turned this prize stud over to Tully, Tully would take care of it and help him grow and become more over.
Well, and that's certainly going to be the case. I do think we should mention that Magnum finishes up at the Fairgrounds Pavilion in Tulsa, in a losing effort to the NWA World Champion. So, yeah, Ric Flair and Magnum TA, something we wish we could have seen a few years later. It actually did happen. Eventually, though, Joel Deaton is the opponent that's chosen for Magnum's first match for Jim Crockett Promotions. On
Another
TV.
real good hand, Conrad. Another really solid, real good hand, I'll tell you.
And he made him look real good in all of 15 seconds. That was part of the original Magnum TA quote unquote push, if you will. It was almost Goldberg-esque, right? A generation before Goldberg. Just get in
using
there.
Using one hold.
Yes.
Using the belly to belly. And he made it work. And that's how you get somebody over. You help them through your creative process, create momentum. And you can't help but create some momentum if your star that you're building is blowing away all his opponents in a matter of seconds with that one move. So a lot of things are accomplished in that regard. He can beat anybody at any time with that one move, including the champion or anybody else.
What do you think about the belly to belly as a finish?
No problem with it. It's a wrestling hold. A lot of old timers like Graham and Watts. And I think Dusty too, knew that it hadn't been overexposed at that point in time. People believed it was real. And so I had no problem with it, because unless you're somebody with a body type like Jerry the Crusher Blackwell, that belly to belly is a pretty effective hold on anybody, because you can apply it to anybody. If you can lock your hands, you can apply the hold, and all they got to do is continue to take their flat backs. It's so amazing, isn't it, how many things end up with a flat back bump? Yeah. If you can do that really good, you it'll be all right. Kind of move yourself along the line.
Talk to me a little bit about whether or not that would work today. Not the belly to belly, but the quick 15-second in and out way to build a guy. Let's get in, let's establish a finish, let's get it over, and let's go home. Could that work in 2021, do you think?
I don't know why it wouldn't.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't it? Why would you think it would? Because I think you have trepidation.
No, I don't. I mean, I'll be honest. I thought a few weeks ago on the AEW pay-per-view that a go-go was going to knock out Cody right away. I mean, I thought for sure, here comes a big body shot 15, 20 seconds into the match, and that's all she wrote. But obviously that didn't happen. Cody was the better man that day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, Conrad, here's the thing. It's largely a matter of execution.
Right.
I know that may be straddling the fence. I'm going to answer your question. Yes, I think it would work today. For it to work today, it would have to be executed properly. But I think that kind of goes along with a lot of things. They got to be executed properly. So absolutely, I think it would work today. It seems like some of those in the creative processes in pro wrestling in general, globally, have lost a lot of patience, and they don't want to feel uncomfortable in allowing something to breathe and to grow. And I think wrestling fans love to see growth. They love to let things breathe. Somebody being on a winning streak. My God, how was Goldberg's? How did Goldberg get over?
Yeah, the winning streak.
Winning streak and quickly, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So if people bought it, so where would be the cutoff date that they were not going to buy that anymore? Bullshit. Fans are going to buy what's good. If it sucks, they're going to tell you because they know what's good and what's not good.
I guess the question is, why don't we see more of it?
I don't know. I think maybe the trepidation is that it's too old school.
I see.
It's too wrestling.
Well, right away, as soon as Magnum's on the scene for Jim Crockett Promotions, he starts talking about the United States title. Dusty Rhodes is talking about Magnum TA, and he's involved with Tully. Right away, he is a top guy for Jim Crockett Promotions. Sometimes when you see this happen, people look back in hindsight and they say, too much too soon. That was not the case with Magnum, though, was it?
No, it was organic. It felt real. It felt like the right thing to say and do and focus on at that point in time. So it just felt like it was right. And here's the deal. The people were buying it.
Yeah.
There were measurables that one could look to see how much they were buying, whether it be television ratings or tickets sold. But they started responding and buying it. And the other thing that we oftentimes overlook is the crowd response. Magnum was getting as big an ovation as anybody in the territory. I don't care who it was. Biggest anybody in the territory. He was young, he was fresh, he was new, and God knows, like a lot of territories that have older school top baby faces and things, as great as Dusty was, all that charisma and all the love he generated from his fan base, they were ready for an alternative. If they, meaning the fans. It's not pronoun boy here. So, yeah.
Let's talk about Wahoo McDaniel. We haven't spent a lot of time talking about him, but one of the first big things that's going to happen for Magnum here in Jim Crockett is he essentially gets married up with Wahoo. And then in late March of 85, he defeats Wahoo for the United States title in a cage match that would later air on Worldwide. That's a big deal. Wahoo is a very established performer, especially in this area. And to sort of have him rub up against a guy like Magnum, that's a huge vote of confidence. Talk to us about Wahoo and why this was such a big win for some of our younger listeners.
Well, if you hear Ric Flair talk about Wahoo, he talks about it in reverent terms. Loved him. I don't know if anybody, I know guys that didn't like Wahoo. I never met anybody in my entire run in wrestling that didn't respect Wahoo. One of the toughest guys ever. And he was like Johnny Valentine. Once that toughness got seeped into the consciousness of the fan base, he was over. And Wahoo stayed over for years and years and years, as probably an average worker with above average charisma and intensity. So for Wahoo to pass the torch to Magnum was the right thing to do, the classy thing to do. And, I think it just made Wahoo even greater that he was willing to do that, because a lot of guys wouldn't have done it. They're going to let the kid prove himself on somebody else, not me. Wahoo was not that way, but to win a title in a cage against this legend, Hall of Fame legend, it was pretty strategic, pretty smart stuff.
So now he's on the path. Obviously, in this era, if you're the United States champion, you become the number one contender for the world title. It's Ric Flair in the big seat at the time. And it feels like it's inevitable that they're going to be programmed together. And when it finally happens, they start to do a lot of house shows, or maybe they were called spot shows back then. And they did the old Broadway. Explain that process to some of our younger listeners.
Well, they didn't want to beat either guy, so they want a time limit draw. Time limit draw, and within the business called a Broadway. My first match I ever refereed was a 10-minute Broadway. And a guy told me on the way to the ring, he said, we're doing a 10-minute they're doing a 10-minute Broadway. And I didn't have the balls to say, I don't know what that means.
Right.
I didn't know what a Broadway was. Well, that's some kind of New York match. They're fighting in taxi cabs or something. Hell, I didn't know. A 10-minute Broadway. So Broadway was a way of having a match, tell a great story without beating either guy. And all of a sudden you got a time limit draw that was in most areas was acceptable as a believable finish. Because sometimes you have draws. Sometimes you have the time runs out or whatever. So that's kind of what that is. It's just a time limit draw. But that's a great way to measure how deep the water is before your challenger gets uncomfortable. Do the hour with Flair was a big deal too.
Yeah.
I said earlier that, Magnum winning that championship in Mid-South was like, a kid at Christmas. I would tell you the same thing about Magnum and working the first time he worked a succession of hour Broadways with Ric Flair. A lot of guys that were booked that way felt privileged they could always say, I went the hour with Flair. That's pretty cool.
Well, what also is cool is Magnum's first big title offense. It's Great American Bash 1985 in Charlotte, North Carolina. There's 27,000 fans there, and he retains by DQ over Kamala after Skandar Akbar interferes. Of course, this is a cool down moment before the big heat begins against the Horsemen. But still, Kamala and Skandar had been established on a lot of different territories, and World Class being one of their first big sort of coming out parties on cable and syndicated. But Magnum in a stadium, 27,000 fans, he's the U.S. champion. Pretty good spot for Mr. Allen to be in.
Yeah, he should have won. Having a DQ finish, who'd that help?
Yeah.
And who are you building? Who's going to the next level the quickest? Kamala or TA? Well, it's obvious. We know the answer. So why wouldn't you beat him? There's a million finishes that Akbar could give you where something happened, miscommunication, boom, and Magnum catches the 1, 2, 3. And let those 27,000 people rejoice. That's what I would say. It's just, there's sometimes where you have, the booker is an active participant. I believe it can, and to anybody, can cloud your judgment. That's one of those deals where that should have been the pop of the night, but somebody wanted something else, I guess, to be the pop of the night. Hell, I don't know. But the bottom line is, if I'm booking that show or I'm running that territory, I'm just going to explain them. I'm not going to have to explain shit. I'm going to tell the booker what we're going to do. Magnum over. Finish. Belly to belly. That's easy. Get there. Figure it out and come back to me. And then you figure it out where you don't want to destroy Kamala. You're not going to beat Kamala in 2 or 3 minutes. You're going to make Magnum make a fierce, hero-like comeback from the depths of hell to overcome the Ugandan giant and win for all of us 27,000 and change. It's too logical.
July 21st in Charlotte, Tully Blanchard is here, and with the aid of Baby Doll dressed up as a police officer, she's going to hand Tully a foreign object as the referee is down. And then, of course, Tully's going to nail Magnum and pin him to take the U.S. title. And we're off to the races with Tully and Magnum. Magnum is working loops on a regular basis with Tully and even teaming with Dusty against the Russians, Nikita Koloff and Crusher Khrushchev. Were you watching Magnum on TV at this point? Are you seeing him advance? Are you pleased with what you're seeing as you're watching from home in Oklahoma?
Yeah, I was very happy for him. He was one of our guys, Connie.
Yeah.
He worked with us for a year and a half. And you see him every week at interviews or at TV or at the office or wherever it may be. I was proud of him. I've always had that theory of this interpromotional shit. I like AEW, but I don't watch such and such. Okay. Why do I need to know that?
Yeah.
It's like that fucking commercial, the waiter doesn't need to know your name.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I watch, and you never know what you learn. You learn things all the time, you might get a booking idea or whatever it may be as well. So, but he was on fire, man. He was progressing in exactly the verticality that he needed to be. He was right on time.
They're trying some weird stuff here. This is, of course, the era where 1985, it's the WrestleMania year, right? So things are off to the races in a big way. People are fired up about, what's happened in wrestling over the last year since WrestleMania sort of made the big splash. And this is where a lot of territories start to really struggle. As a result of that, we see something that a lot of people thought we would never see. The NWA World Champion Ric Flair defending his title against Magnum TA at an AWA Super Clash from Comiskey Park in Chicago. An interesting approach here. Let's have our own sort of big super show, and let's invite the NWA World Champion into an AWA event. And oh, by the way, it's at a baseball stadium.
Yeah, good PR.
Yeah.
Good media. Good way to, it just puts another brick in the wall on the fact that Jimmy Crockett knew where he wanted to go. This is about exposing Terry Allen, because you always know you're going to have a great match in Rick.
Oh yeah.
So, I mean, that's sad to say, because it's taking things for granted. And that's not good. But seriously, that was a smart PR move. The guys, I'm sure, got a nice payday out of it. The office may have got a couple of bucks out of it, but the main thing is the talent's got money. They got exposure to a new and different audience. And you know as well as I do that the Nates loves to steal the show. Loves it. He loves to leave those guys behind in his dust. Outwork this, you son of a bitches, if you think you can. Ha ha ha. You know, and laugh about it. So I'm only teasing. No, you're not. You're serious as a heart attack, you son of a bitch. You're going to show them all up. And then he had the young gun. You know, they're going to be the fastest gun on earth at some point in time. Soon to be the next champion. And all of a sudden, you know, he's getting his nice rub in that market. Because you know as well as I do that once the championship was made and Magnum was the champion at some point going forward, that they'd be back in that market running that arena or running that stadium or wherever it may be. It's always a method to the madness.
There's an interesting angle here that I don't think you could do in 2021. Back in 85, though, Magnum TA forces a kiss on his nemesis Tully Blanchard's valet, Baby Doll. And, of course, before you know it, we've got a collision course set. It's Magnum and Tully at Starrcade, and not just any old match. It's a steel cage I Quit match. And of course, at the time, the NWA president, Bob Geigel, refuses to sanction it. We don't talk about Bob enough, but I love his old school appearances here. And this match, the I Quit steel cage match, to this day is probably the gold standard for an I Quit match. Would you agree?
I've never seen a better one. I thought Rick and Terry Funk's was pretty damn special. Because I got to call that one.
Bret and Stone Cold too, in a different era.
Bret and Stone Cold had a magnificent story. Those three stand out.
Yeah.
Those three stand out as much as anything that come off the top of my head right now. And I was very lucky. I got to call, I got to call Bret and Steve, and I got to call, what's the other one I just said? We're just talking about the I Quit.
Oh, Funk and Flair.
Funk and Flair, yeah.
Yeah.
I kind of have, selfishly, I kind of had more fun with the Funk and Flair. And here's why, because I worked with Gordon.
Right.
And it was one of his, I would venture to say safely, his last major hurrah. Live primetime television, you know, TBS cable, you know, Terry Funk, Ric Flair, Gary Hart, Tommy Young. It was a cast of stars. And Gordon there at ringside doing commentary. So for me, that was a personal, cool factor, without a doubt.
Let's mention too that the match is one of the more violent matches you could see. I think if you're going to watch any match of Magnum's career, you should probably go out of your way to see the steel cage match with Tully at Starrcade, right?
Yeah, it's a great piece of business. It goes to show you what happens when you're both unselfish and you take your time to build the match and not throw anything away, meaning that something great doesn't happen that's not registered. So yeah, I go out of my way to see that one. You won't be disappointed whatsoever.
Jim Crockett actually comes out and says he's going to overrule Bob Geigel. We're sanctioning the match for Jim Crockett Promotions. And blood matches at the time, you know, matches where guys are bleeding, that's not exactly unusual in this era. But violent matches back then were maybe more common, but it felt like just turned the volume up. And on the way here, by the way, the Magnum situation spills over to the rest of the Horsemen, to the point that the Horsemen vow to take out Magnum ahead of Starrcade. And, of course, they're running lots of things on TV, but ultimately it happens. November 28th, 1985 in Greensboro, the epic steel cage match. It's about 15 minutes, but famously the story is that chair and the broken piece of wood. Tell us about it, Jim.
Well, it was used as a weapon in a very, in the eye, as I remember. Isn't that right?
When he hits him with the wooden chair and it starts to break off, he breaks off another piece and it forms almost like out of a movie, the perfect spike. Yeah. And it couldn't have been planned. It was just luck. It was right time, right place. And as he starts to threaten to dig it into the eye, he gets it into the head and he's almost into the eye. And I guess technically Tully never said, "I quit." He just said yes to the referee asking, "Do you quit? Do you quit?" Eventually he yells yes. And that's it. Magnum is the United States champion. It's a special moment. Probably one of the biggest moments in Starrcade history.
Tully didn't go over, but he got over.
Oh yeah.
And Magnum got that elusive win under dire circumstances, that took Herculean efforts and desire to accomplish. All the great stories are told. All the boxes are checked. So yeah, that Starrcade match with Magnum and Tully, if you're an old school fan and love psychology and you love aggressiveness and the brutality, this is yours. So
the next day, we've got Magnum TA wrestling Arn Anderson. Now, as a reminder, Magnum's the US champ and Arn is the TV champ, and Magnum wins, but then immediately vacates it and gives it to Jim Crockett. Sort of a weird way to, I get the story we're trying to tell. He's one by one taking out the Horsemen, but he wins the belt and immediately says, "Okay, I'm just going to vacate it right away."
Well, they didn't want to beat him.
Yeah.
So the situation there is that why did you book it then?
Well, yeah.
Title versus title. You got to have a winner, or unless you do some weaker than a plate full of cat piss finish. But here's the thing. You got to be careful when you're pushing these young bucks, no pun intended, to newer heights. It's got to be done, or if not, you have die Rocky die. You don't want that. You don't want to shove things down people's throat. So I think that the bottom line to me is that he just won the match of his life. Why can't we celebrate that? Why can't we rejoice in that, memorialize that to some degree? Instead, we're just right off again, and this is the next booking. It's kind of illogical when you stop thinking about it in those terms.
Let's mention that Magnum starts cutting promos in early '86, and he announces that his goal, his New Year's resolution, if you will, for 1986 is to take the NWA world title from Ric Flair. And when I was fortunate enough last year to sit down with Jim Crockett, I asked, hey, if things hadn't have happened the way they did with Magnum in the car crash, and we're going to get there in just a moment, would the plan have been Flair versus Magnum at Starrcade? And he said, no question. Would you have predicted in early '86, hey, Magnum's the next NWA world champ?
Yeah, absolutely. To me, it was just a no-brainer, Conrad, without sounding flippant. It's just, he was over, he was on a roll, he was young, and it wasn't so much about Rick. It's about just giving a different perspective to the championship. Because as long as Rick could perform to any level, he was going to be in the picture. So it wasn't about Rick. Oh, we got to get Rick this. He's getting old. We got to change this. We got to get his haircut. We got to do. Come on. You want to build new stars. And what better way to build a star than to anoint him at your biggest event of the year, beating the number one guy in the entire world? That's how you get somebody over. And he beats him, and he's a new champion. And now you run with that. Do you have heels ready to go against him? Or are we back to just going to do return matches?
Right.
And I always hated that. Well, we'll get some returns out of it. But what's next? Oh, we'll figure it out. What? The next several opponents should be already earmarked because you should already be building them. If you don't know who his next run's going to be with, then how are you getting them ready?
Right.
Fill in the blank here. So, yeah, to me, it was, as I said earlier in the show, many of us believed, and Bill and I believe this, but we didn't have any say in the title, obviously. That was Jimmy's deal in that era. But, we said all along that this kid's going to be the guy.
Right.
And because he got over in our territory, much like when we get dates on the NWA champion and he comes in, we expect to draw big houses.
Sure.
Everybody wins, man.
So to start 86, before Magnum can get to Flair, he's got to handle the Russians, both Ivan and Nikita. They come knocking on his door and they're asking for U.S. title shots. Man, these two were really perfect for each other. When you look back at the career of Magnum TA, Nikita Koloff sort of defines him as his best opponent. I think it's got to be him or Tully. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I'd say Tully, but the newness and why promoters are always looking for something new to promote is that it was fresh.
Right.
And Nikita was a fresh villain in this super Russian, commie bullshit. And so it was attractive at that time. But to say that that Nikita's matches were better executed, ain't no way. Tully's, and that's not a knock at Nikita whatsoever.
Oh no, of course not.
But it's just a matter that Tully was that damn good. So, but yeah, he came along in a good place at a good time, and little did we know how big a part of the Magnum TA story that Nikita Koloff would play eventually.
Yeah, we're going to get into that. I'm just fascinated with when you go back, and Tony Schiavone and I have been doing this for all of 86. You go back and you listen to Magnum's promos, and they're great against Tully, but man, they are another level against Nikita. He becomes Mr. Captain America. I mean, he is Captain Patriotism, and he's for, all things America. And man, there's nothing he hates more than those dirty Russians. And he believes it. Of course, these days, some of that seems a little hokey and a little tongue in cheek, but at the time, in context is king, as Eric Bischoff says all the time, that was the way of the world. The Cold War was very much a thing. And I don't know, man, it just feels like, nostalgia at its finest. The all-American champion defending the United States title against this Russian machine. We're right around the same time as Rocky IV, right? So you've got Ivan Drago, and I don't know, but it just feels like from a promo standpoint and a story standpoint, as great as the Tully matches were, I just think the Nikita stuff was just Americana circa 86.
Yeah, it was great. Easy to understand.
Yeah.
Easy concept to sell and to communicate without a doubt. Nikita looked invincible. The physique was scary. He had perfected that for a kid from Minnesota. He perfected that Russian accent pretty good. He sounded like he looked, which is kind of cool. So, and Uncle Ivan didn't hurt things. Uncle Ivan was always there to add whatever you needed, and you knew it would be executed correctly. Ivan Koloff was a great pro and a good man. Cowboy told me his real name was, I think his real name, but his name that he went by for years was Red McNulty. So when he first came to Mid-South, I went in the locker room and the heel locker room, just bullshitting my way through like I do in life. And I said, anybody here named Red McNulty? Boy, old Ivan looked up. It's like he thought the FBI was on to him, or something.
That's funny.
Is there Red McNulty here? And anyway, we got a good laugh out of it, probably more than the fans just did. But nonetheless, Red McNulty was Ivan Koloff. And I think his first name was like Oriole, Orreal or something. Anyhow, they were a good pair. That was a good booking. Dusty was smart in that regard, and Jimmy too, that you made sure that with your young gun heel, you got an old pro veteran with him to make sure he didn't go crazy here. Same thing that Magnum had guys where he was in the ring with, like Tully, to make sure you don't veer too far to the left when we're trying to go right type thing.
Let's talk a little bit about Crockett Cup 1986. It's a big show from the Superdome. Bruce Pritchard is the ring announcer. Yourself and Tony Schiavone are doing commentary. Of course, he's the voice of Jim Crockett. You're the voice of Mid-South. And we would see Magnum TA team with Ronnie Garvin to defeat Giant Baba and Tiger Mask in the semifinals. Man, talk about styles clash. Giant Baba and Tiger Mask. Some of our younger listeners who only grew up with you in the Attitude Era probably don't even know who those cats are. Tell us about Giant Baba and Tiger Mask.
Well, Giant Baba owned All Japan Pro Wrestling. He owned the company. He was the Tony Khan of his company and a former baseball player in the major leagues there in Japan. And a man named Ricky Dozan started both Inoki and Giant Baba in the business. Then along the way, after Inoki got murdered, when Ricky Dozan got murdered, then the two young guns decided to go on their own. And Inoki formed New Japan, and Baba created All Japan. And they had national television shows on national TV, and had some of the greatest stars in the world working for them, and they were training them. And then they brought some really, really important and powerful Americans, Guy Jeans, over there as well. So I think that was just probably to facilitate a meeting more than anything. I went to a party one time, a function with Jimmy put on in, where the hell was it? It was some island we went to. And there's been a shot online of Dusty playing golf at this outing, wearing his underwear. It was hideous. Dusty playing golf in less than his tights. So anyway, where the hell was that place? Anyway, Bob would love to gamble. So it was gambling and all that stuff. And so they were buddies. And it was a matter of talent exchange. It all comes back to talent exchange. You loan us your guy, we'll loan you our guy, whatever. Right. So that's kind of where that was. But I think it was more of a political booking than attractive to the masses of the card. Because like you said, a lot of people were not familiar with Giant Baba or his partner at that time.
Is this the first time you've seen Magnum since he left?
Probably was. Yeah, probably was. He looked like he'd aged. He looked tired. His head was all, it looked like, I said, you're going to look like Abdullah before it's all said and done if you don't slow down a little bit. But, he was always jovial and friendly, and we always got along well. We always really did. And because I was always honest with him, and he was always up front with me. And if somebody needed something communicated to the cowboy that they didn't feel comfortable of doing, then I was your man. So I felt like Silvio Dante on The Sopranos.
Did you ever
talk to Tony?
Did you ever go drinking with Magnum? What was his drink of choice? Do you recall?
I want to think maybe he's a Jack Daniels guy.
Yeah, it feels like a lot of guys were back then.
Yeah, he drank the brown, I believe, as best I recall. But I didn't go drinking with him that often. But we certainly had a few cocktails over the years.
Well,
I want to say I think he was drinking hard liquor.
It wasn't a celebratory cocktail after Crockett Cup. Magnum and Garvin would make it to the finals, but they lose to the Road Warriors. Overall, how fun was the 86 Crockett Cup? Sort of a two-part show, early show, late show. It was a unique concept.
It was fun. Well, you're in New Orleans for several days.
Yeah, never bad.
What do you need? Eggs in your beer? It's a good deal. So, no, it's good. Food was good. I think everybody on the roster realized you can't drink all the liquor, no matter how hard you try in New Orleans. There's always more coming. And so it was just a decadent. And I don't know if anybody made any money on that show or not, to be honest with you. I had no idea what Tony's arrangements were. I was just working. It was a booking to me. So I didn't make another dime extra, but I got to stay in a nice place and eat good food on the Cowboys tab. But it was fun. All the boys are there, and of course they're all looking for adventure and get themselves into mistress. Well, that may have been a fraudulent slip. They get themselves into mischief or a mistress, who knows? So it was fun though. It was a good time. And I was surprised and pleasantly so, Conrad. And I went behind the scenes as far as the finishes, things were ongoing and planning. I never heard anybody have any major issues on it. Both the bookers tried to take care of Watts and Dusty were booking it, and they were trying to make sure that they kept peace in the proverbial valley and take care of the talents as best they could. I don't know why we do that. It's to that level. Make sure everybody's happy. Are you fucking happy you got paid? Are you happy about that? Or was that also a disappointment? Well, I didn't want to lose, but he beat me with a small package. That's kind of what I was looking for. Oh, so he can't beat you with his finish. You don't want him beating you with the strongest thing he's got in his book. You want him to beat you on a banana peel inside cradle. You're brilliant. Next year, I'm going to have you do my fucking taxes. So, yeah, come on. Anyway, I had a blast. Had a lot of fun there. And it's funny, if I remember correctly, there was a discussion held between Crockett and Watts about Shivani and me and what we're going to do there. And Bill said, well, Jim can ring announce. I hated ring announcing, but I would have done it because that's what he told me to do. And Jimmy was so smooth there. He said, well, my guy doesn't ring announce. So Cowboy said, well, my guy won't ring announce either. I'll show you, by God.
Yeah.
So that's Bruce may have gotten that gig by default. I'm not sure. Not that he did a bad job or nothing.
Yeah.
They got to wear a little tuxedo and got in the ring in the dome, and it's all another good experience, man.
Let's keep it going. Let's talk about what's next for Magnum after the Crockett Cup. It's not too long, and him and Dusty start wearing masks and calling themselves the James Boys. Of course, down in Florida, and even later, Dusty would adopt this other persona known as the Midnight Rider. And I guess this is another version of the same thing, the James Boys. What'd you think of that creative?
I thought it was another way of Dusty latching onto Magnum.
Yeah. A lot of people felt that about Dusty at the time, that he was making himself a 6-man champion with the Road Warriors because he wanted to latch on to the Road Warriors. And perhaps he saw, hey, this Magnum kid's moving up the ladder. I need to attach myself there. But usually when I hear that, I think it's talent with, maybe an axe to grind or fussing about sour grapes, but you just said it. So you agree.
I got no axe to grind. The point is that, Dusty, like all of us, needs a filter.
Sure.
And Jimmy was sometimes reluctant to be that filter.
Yes.
And set his foot down. And, it was just, I felt badly for Dusty at times, Conrad, because I think sometimes as he got older, it started affecting his self-esteem a little bit and started getting more insecure, like all performers do. This is not a Dusty Rhodes thing. It's a thing that happens in our business, and I'm sure in other walks of entertainment and sports and so forth. So, and I felt badly for that because apparently he felt like he needed those titles to maintain his relevancy. I totally disagree with that. Dusty Rhodes, in a personal angle, has more of a validity and more markability than any championship match. Always had, always will. And Dusty was built for that kind of shit. So I felt bad for him on that deal because he didn't, in essence, didn't give himself enough credit.
Right.
So, and God almighty, if anybody already had the credit, it's Dusty Rhodes.
Let's keep it moving here and talk about what's next for Magnum, because the James Boys are going to start feuding with the Midnight Express. And of course, this is going to create some great promos from not only Dusty, who's not really Dusty, he's one of the James Boys. And of course, Jim Cornette firing back. And eventually, May 31st is the legendary episode. We just recently talked about this on What Happened When with Tony Schiavone. Crockett sets up a contract signing for the match between Nikita and Magnum. And since Nikita always has Ivan with him, Magnum brings his mom, Marion, with him. And eventually Nikita insults Marion by saying Russian women have more class and maybe a few other unkind things. And Magnum attacks. Bob Geigel would then publicly reprimand Magnum for quote unquote conduct unbecoming a champion. And Magnum replies, reprimand this, and punches Bob Geigel, which gets him stripped of the U.S. title. Major angle. This is before every contract signing happened in the ring and a table was flipped or someone went through a table. This is kind of fun stuff. What'd you think of this creative?
I liked it. I liked the good. It was well laid out, well thought. The inclusion of a new character into the formula, i.e. Terry's mom, was not only fresh, but it was very unique, and it was relatable. Most people, unless they're total sociopaths, are going to get pissed off when somebody talks about their mother.
Oh yeah.
We all can identify with that feeling, that emotion, how raw it gets. So I thought it was well done. A good angle. And here's another thing. You got the U.S. title off Magnum without beating him. So there could be a philosophical debate by some listening right now. Well, that was the right way to do it. I normally would agree with you. You beat him by hook or crook somehow. But this thing with Geigel and the fact that he punches Geigel.
Yeah.
Really put the cherry on the sundae.
It's a big moment for sure. And, eventually Geigel is going to announce that the U.S. title has been held up and, it's going to be determined in a best of 7 series. Or I think maybe Crockett decided that. Either way, the idea is, hey, I know you Russians think just because Magnum was stripped of the title that you're going to by default be champion, but that's not true. In fact, in order for your man to finally be U.S. champ and take this belt back to Russia, you're going to have to beat Magnum not once, but 4 times. And believe it or not, Magnum loses the first 3 and then mounts a comeback and evens the series up at 3 apiece. By the way, this is all taking place during the Great American Bash Tour in 1986. And now, of course, wouldn't you know it? It's down to match number 7. It's a completely different time. None of those matches are on TV. They're all live events. But back in the day, this is before television rights were really a thing. This is the era where you make money in wrestling by getting an ass every 18 inches, right?
Yeah, that's it. Selling tickets. I thought the best of 7 was provocative. I enjoyed it. I'd love to see AEW do a best of 5 or best of 7 somewhere down the road. It's just good. It's natural and organic and real episodic programming. And I think we all like that's what turned a lot of us on to wrestling back in the day when we were younger, was it was written episodically. Well, I don't believe what happened last week, and then coming up next week, and everything gets kept tying together. So, yeah, I liked that. I thought it worked.
Well, game 7, listen to me. Match number 7 finally happens. And, it's August 17th, the Coliseum in Charlotte. And believe it or not, Magnum loses to Nikita. I think most fans just assume, oh, he'll win the last one. This is the storybook ending, but it doesn't happen. Ivan and Crusher interfere here. And now Nikita is your United States champion. But I guess the idea is we don't necessarily want Magnum to win because we're trying to get him ready for Flair. But by having Magnum go to the distance, Nikita's a made man now too, right?
Yeah. You got 2 wins out of it. Again, Magnum may not have won, but he got over.
Right.
Great story. Fought till the end. Took it 7 games. All that good stuff against a monster, against a legitimate monster. But you're right. It frees Magnum of this U.S. title, agenda. Turn your sights to bigger things, and what the eventual goal was going to be for several months.
We should mention that doesn't quite happen. October 13th, Magnum TA would headline a live event against Jimmy Garvin in a lumberjack match at the Memorial Auditorium in Greenville, and he wins. And sadly, that's Magnum's last match. The next day, which is a rare day off for Magnum, he's driving his Porsche and he's in the rain and he loses control. He winds up wrapping the car around a telephone pole just miles from home, and the accident causes his C4 and C5 vertebrae to explode, and his ability to walk again is in severe doubt. His wrestling career is over, Jim, and he's only 27 years old. I know you're not with Jim Crockett Promotions at this point and you're in Mid-South, but he's one of your guys.
Yeah.
And this news travels quickly. How did you hear the news? Who reached out?
Cowboy, somebody, maybe Dusty. I'm sure probably Dusty. Probably would have been Jimmy. Jimmy and Bill were not that close. But I think probably Dusty called Cowboy. It was horrible. I just did. I wanted to think that it couldn't be accurate. It's one of those goddamn rumors, telephone, telegraph, tell a wrestler deal, or your world famous rumor in your window, or your other world famous sassafras shit, which I have no idea what it even means.
That's not mine. That's Bruce's.
You guys share the heat. What a fucking tag team you two boys are. Sassafras. God damn. Okay. Anyhow, don't get me started on that which I know nothing about. It was horrible. You wanted to think seriously, all joking aside, it can't be true. It can't be as tragic as it has been reported. We'd heard about the vertebrae and he was in danger of not being able to walk at all. Because there was some time there early on, Conrad, that the phone calls, we kept getting back and forth. It was kind of touch and go.
Yeah.
His overall living and dying. So it was just, you just didn't want to believe it. And I think something special was taken out of the business that night, whenever it was. It just seemed like we've lost something we can't replace.
Right.
Because you go back and look at it through all the teachings and the coaching and the mentoring and the men in Magnum's life who helped get him ready for this opportunity. And here's what he's accomplished. And he's 27. It was scary. All I'm saying is that I believe he would have been the NWA champion. And unless politics or some other crazy thing reared its ugly head, he would be the NWA champion for a long time to come. A long reign. And not where your first thought after the match is over, where he becomes champion, is then, now, when are we going to take it off of him?
Right.
That's a defeatist attitude. It's very much negative thinking.
Yes.
So I just didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to believe that what happened. And I know the first time I saw him, can't remember exactly where it was, but I just, you see this guy that's just bigger than life character, tall and strong and smiling, and got the world by the short hairs. And it just didn't look like the same human being. What shows you, man, tomorrow's not guaranteed, Conrad. We say that all the time here on this show. And you never know, man, when your deck's going to be reshuffled, and you're going to get an awful bad hand dealt to you. And that's what Terry Allen did. He got an awfully bad hand dealt to him.
Yeah, it's hard to really think about, because everybody always goes to the sort of what if scenario. What if the accident wouldn't have happened? And I think we all agree that he would have beaten Ric Flair and become world champion. But do you think eventually he would have had his seemingly inevitable run with Vince? What would Vince have thought about a guy like Magnum?
It would have been very challenging to keep him away from Vince. And my senses are, Conrad, that Magnum TA would eventually ended up in the WWF.
Yeah.
And simply because of the mathematics involved. Vince had paid him a tremendous amount of money to sign. And he would have been a combination of Bret Hart and maybe Bob Backlund, a babyface champion that could wrestle.
Yeah.
And he had those fiery promos. He was big size-wise. He checked Vince's boxes there. So I think without a doubt, and I don't think it would have been something he would have wanted to do. I think it's something that he would be compelled to do because just doing the money, getting those paydays. and hopefully get enough stored away, because you never know when a car accident's going to happen. So I do think he would have been, not right away, but at some point, again, he would have been NWA champion at 27.
Right. It's hard to imagine.
Yeah. So he's not even reached his 30th birthday, and here's what he's attained and earned and learned. So, yeah, I think he would have been there and would have been a Hall of Famer.
In a lot of ways, obviously it's tragic that his career was cut short and his quality of life was affected forever. But you got to think, with the way that accident happened, a little bit different here or there, he wouldn't be with us to tell the story at all.
Correct. And that's the blessing we have out of this, is that, Terry has been able to married Tully's ex, ironically enough, for some that don't know. They got beautiful children. He's happy. He's got a good job. He's been on the job for a long time. He's a success story. He's a good father. He does a lot of things with his kids. They do, I've seen pictures on Facebook and Twitter and things where he's out with his son, those guys that do that mudding.
Yeah.
The sports utility vehicles. He drives one of those now, but he's got to have a little help. But what the hell? I admire him. He's one of my heroes. I can tell you that right now. For anybody that's down on their luck or they're having a bad day or whatever, go back to this guy's life when he's 27 years old. How would you handle it? And he handled this as well as any human being, I believe, could possibly handle it, Conrad.
And he was so beloved at the time. It's been reported the hospital was getting over 700 calls a day once the news gets out about the accident through the local news. And there were over 70,000 cards sent to the hospital. I mean, Magnum was, a lot of people felt like as close as they were going to get at Jim Crockett Promotions, their answer to Hulk Hogan. And it doesn't happen. And famously, of course, Rick, the NWA World Champion, would visit Magnum in the hospital. And at the time, Rick has told the story that they had Magnum in one of those old tubes, the iron lung, if you will. And Rick's trying to express his condolences, and he's obviously torn up about what's happened with somebody that he had a lot of fun with over the years. And he leaves the belt there in the hospital with him and says, "I was supposed to drop this with you or to you." And even, my wife Megan remembers going to the hospital as a little girl and seeing Magnum in the hospital. And it was a profound moment in wrestling.
Yeah. You could tell it was the end of an era.
Yeah.
It's like that song, The Day the Music Stopped.
Yes.
The Buddy Holly thing. The day the music died. And I felt some music died that day. And because when you get a great bright star like that explodes in the galaxy, that can't be replicated automatically, or ever. But he just gave the business so much hope, and the better that he would do in his territory of choice, the better the rest of us would do. Specifically speaking of the Mid-South, because we knew we were going to get dates on him. He's going to still be our guy a few days a year, just like Rick come into Mid-South all the time and made good paydays and had fun, as best I remember. So, because I was a chaperone.
The loss of Magnum forces Dusty, as the booker, to turn Nikita babyface. And the storyline reason is he respects Magnum and wants to honor him. So when it comes time for Flair to defend the world title at Starrcade, he's taking on not Magnum, but Magnum's old nemesis, who's now doing it for Magnum, Nikita. What do you think of that creative switching him?
I was pleasantly surprised by it. I didn't see it coming. It was the right thing to do in the hindsight, without a doubt. And he was just very lucky they had Nikita there. And Nikita and Magnum had already established a good rivalry, history, whatever you want to say. So, but I liked it. I liked it. I don't know where else you go. I mean, you elevate a already established baby face, or do you go something fresh and new like Nikita? And I'm always for going fresh and new. So I like that creative.
Talk to me a little bit about Cody Rhodes. I've read, and I didn't know this, and I've never asked Cody about it, but I read that Magnum is actually the godfather to Cody Rhodes. How close were Dusty and Magnum in real life? And had you heard that story before?
I have not heard that story, but it certainly would not surprise me whatsoever. I mentioned this earlier that Dusty was the guiding light and the number one supporter of Magnum TA. And that's not exaggeration. Dusty saw what he had. And when you're the booker and you got something that's thrown right in your face, there it is. You know, it's like someone inheriting or developing a defiant young Steve Austin. Don't screw this up.
Right.
This is going to work if we don't fuck it up. And I think Dusty saw that with Magnum. He was a natural. You would have to go out of your way and create a strategy to make it not work. But Dusty and Magnum were like brothers. I guess is the best way of putting it. Like brothers. And a lot of love there. So, and I've always respected and appreciated Dusty for that, you know, to take the time and out of his life and everything else to make sure that Magnum was going to be ready for his opportunity when it came about, which is going to be sooner than later until the accident.
There's various interviews done by Magnum's mother for TV to update everyone on Magnum's condition and just letting them know that he's slowly improving. It's February before he's seen on camera again, and he's doing an interview with Tony Schiavone just to update everyone on his progress and share that he has taken steps again. But it's been said that he, lost mobility on his right side and had to teach himself how to write and eat left-handed. Man, how fucking tough is Magnum, huh?
Yeah, mentally tough, to say the least. He's a freak. I say, get that athlete. You learn that in the wrestling room. He's a tough kid, and he's involved in competitive athletics on a high level. Tough guy, but he had to learn all those things all over. He had to walk with a brace on one leg. He unfortunately looked like a stroke victim, where he's debilitated on one side of his body. It was just, when I first saw him, I took my breath. I had to turn my head for a second because I was going to cry. It was just, wasn't supposed to be this way.
No.
And, but man, oh man, he never quit. A lot of guys should just go rehab their way to the rest of their life. They're done. This son of a gun kept fighting, and he's still fighting to this very day. And for those that follow his career on social media or wherever it may be, I think he's at Real Magnum TA on Twitter. I believe that's right. He's still active. He's still living his life. He's still enjoying being a father and a husband and a son. So my hat's off to Magnum TA. Can't take it off enough for him.
Let's real fast. It's at the Real Magnum TA on Twitter if you want to find it. Okay. At the Real Magnum TA. But Magnum's first appearance in front of a crowd since the accident is when he comes out before the finals of the Crockett Cup in '87. He's going to lend his support to Dusty and Nikita, who eventually win over Tully and Lex, which we recently covered in our Lex Luger episode. But man, what a moment to see Magnum in front of a crowd again. They were hot for it. And you would even announce on UWF TV that Magnum would be on the show in May. And Magnum's put into a feud with the Horseman and Tully Blanchard as he's standing alongside Dusty. Ultimately, Magnum winds up not helping Dusty win the TV title and blaming himself. But Magnum, even in this era, is still cutting promos saying he's going to return to the ring one day. And of course, we know that didn't happen. Do you think he, in his heart of hearts, hoped that was realistic, thought it really could happen, or was he just trying to entertain?
No, I think he wanted it to happen.
Yeah.
He wanted to will it to happen.
Speak it into existence, if you will.
And probably nobody in the whole world wanted it to happen more than him. And if you don't believe in something, Conrad, it can't come true.
Right.
You just can't, and it won't. So that was his calling card. I'm going to be back. Don't worry about it. I will be back. I promise you. And that was always his long-term goal. And I'm not so surprised that's not his goal today. I'm getting better. I'm doing things better. My mechanics are more sound and so forth. So I don't know. I just I think that's just in his heart.
Right.
When you get that warrior heart, and that warrior heart, whatever you want to say, that's just you can't factor it out. You can't neuter yourself from it. That's just who you are, and that's who he is. So I'm like I said, I can't tell you how much of a backer I am of Terry Allen. And when you get a chance to see him at some of these autograph things that he's booked on now, he enjoys those. He enjoys seeing the fans. He enjoys hearing the stories. Support him in that regard, because he's still that warrior at heart who loves pro wrestling, who got probably the worst hand that could have been dealt to somebody at his stage in life and with his future.
I want to mention Magnum wound up hosting a couple of episodes of UWF TV with you. What was it like to work with Magnum now that he's trying a second act in wrestling? Now he's going to be a commentator.
Well, he obviously had a good command of the English language. He understood the business well. He understood how to make his points. And as a color guy, to front load your sound bites. And then if you got time to back them up, if you time-wise on the show, he was fun to work with. We'd sit and go over the angles and stuff, but as far as, hey, you say this, I'll say this, I've never worked well in that environment. And I've been trying to be put in that environment a few times in my career, and it's not really enjoyable, because I think the fans can see through it's just a little contrived, and our nature of the beast of our product is that anyway. So you just don't take us farther down that road. It's undesirable. But he was good. He was good. He had logic and common sense. Like I said, he spoke well, and he understood the product. And I was so glad to work with him, because he's getting some happiness back in his life. What we all seek every day.
One of the more chaotic angles that took place in this year was the March 23rd episode from the WTBS studios. Magnum at this point's not really moving around all that well, but he's cutting a promo at ringside with a baseball bat about Tully and the Horsemen. Tully and JJ interrupt. Tully cuts a promo and basically says, Magnum, you're going to get hurt even worse than you already are if you keep putting yourself in Horseman business. Barry Windham comes out to separate them, and Tully punches Barry right in the face. Barry drops, and Magnum, who can not really move all that well, is grabbed, and Tully punches Magnum. JJ grabs Magnum to help control the fall to the floor. But it's a pretty sad scene. And of course, Dusty comes out, makes the save. People are swinging bats wide open. It's a chaotic scene. What do you remember about this angle?
Pretty cool angle, but I was uncomfortable with it.
Me too.
I remember it, quote unquote, got over.
Yes.
But I was a little uncomfortable with it. I thought the old rabbit hole was in sight. How do you get out of it?
Yeah.
What young baby face is made there?
Yeah.
And so that's my take on it. I remember it. I remember the angle, but I would not have done it. Too risky for a guy that's had his body put back together to take a bump on a TV studio for fucking what?
Well, big moment. Magnum is going to corner Sting and Luger in their Crockett Cup in 88 when they win that thing over Arn and Tully. And then not too long after that, Magnum starts Straight Talk with the Boss on Worldwide. How'd you think Magnum did in his role as sort of a talk show host?
Not bad. I thought he was a better analyst alongside a play-by-play guy. I thought that was the perfect role for him, because you don't have to create all the content. Just flow and create as you go. And I think that's kind of where I thought of that, Connie. I think he always had great effort, and he's always prepared well, but it's a tough job to be, that's a Jim Cornette kind of role. Cornette can be his own MC and his own guest and whatever. He's just got that much talent. And Magnum just had not been around that long in the broadcasting world, because all you're basically doing out there is long promos.
Right.
And I think he was much more valuable in doing color. I remember working the Chicago show with Flair and Steamboat when Steamboat won the title. Magnum was my partner. So that was a big assignment for him. And me too, by the way. But it was a big assignment for Magnum to be able to do color on that main event with Rick losing the title. They had some kind of half-assed cruel irony. It should have been Magnum taking the title. Instead, they had to pivot and go a different direction. But he got the call. He was with me on the call, so I think he felt good about that, having that opportunity to stay connected to the business he loves.
Well, we're going to start winding things down here, but I want to mention Magnum would replace Tony Schiavone after Tony left for the WWF. He's going to join you as a host on World Championship Wrestling, and he's a color guy until Chi-Town Rumble in '89. He winds up finishing up on TV with the March 18th edition of WCW, and he does interviews with Sting and Ranger Ross here. Why was this the end of the run here for Magnum? I know he's going to come back in 91, and I always assume that's because Dusty came back into the fold, but why was he finishing up here in 89?
I don't really know I don't know the specific reason. I really don't. I don't know if it was his health, just creative decision-making, or whatever. But he was deemed to be expendable in that regime. And that's what happens.
Is that Hurd's call, you think?
I don't, might have been. But he is much like and Watts' tenure there alienated me from some opportunities, seemingly. That's kind of what happened here with Terry. He was so closely aligned with Dusty. When Dusty was out, it kind of left him vulnerable. I hate to see him go because I like working with him. He's never a guy who was late. He's always prepared. He's always on time. Very professional. But I don't remember all the details, Conrad, but I do recall that I didn't think it was very appropriate. I thought we could have done better in how that situation was handled. But
do you think his heart was still in wrestling? I mean, I understand he's still here and he's doing the gig and he's calling wrestling, but when you were on top and had it all taken away, it's got to affect your love of the game. Does it not?
Yeah, of course it does. Absolutely. I think his passion was always going to overcome any other negative issues he might have had. I just wish I could remember all the details of why he was gone. And it may have been a cost thing. It may have been a budgetarily infeasible in their view. I just don't know. But I do know that it wasn't anything personally he did, nor was it the quality of his work. And that really is all I was concerned about. Are you a pro and do you do quality work? The answer regarding Magnum was both those questions is yes.
Well, let's wrap it up. But before we do, I want to mention he's honored by WCW in a Legends ceremony at the Slamboree show in 1993. Oh, I do want to ask this. They briefly, I guess around late 92, they tried to position as almost like a father figure for Shane Douglas. Do you know what the plan was there or the story was there with that idea?
Well, obviously at the end of the day is to give Shane a rub.
Right.
Other than that, I don't know. I don't recall much about it, but again, Magnum's influence was prized and honored and recognized. And at that time, there was those in the company that had high expectations for Shane Douglas, the babyface.
Coming up,
good looking, educated kid. He needed a little something to help him get along on down the road. And the thought was maybe Magnum can help facilitate that.
Coming up next week, we're going to be talking all things King of the Ring 1996. But before we get there, we've got some fan questions. Let's rapid fire some of these, Jim. Hornets Beard Guy wants to know, what do you think of Magnum's WWF run and what could it have looked like? Do you think Magnum had potential to be a WWF champion if the accident had never happened? We sort of talked about this earlier, Jim, but I think the big question is, would it have happened as long as Hogan was there? I mean, is it conceivable that instead of Hogan passing the torch to the Ultimate Warrior in 1990, it's Magnum TA? That's tough for me to envision.
Well, because the Warrior Hogan thing was so historic. But I'm just going to say this. I don't know how it would have gone down, how the booking would have been reconfigured, 40 years ago, whatever it's been. Magnum TA would have gone to WWF, Conrad.
Yes.
Magnum TA would have been the WWF champion at some point, Conrad, and he would be in the WWE Hall of Fame today if all those things had occurred. That's my take on it. It's just, again, that cruelty of the time and the incidents and all those things are what they are. But there's no way Vince McMahon, as smart as he is and always has been, would allow a talent with a potential upside of Terry Allen to not work for Vince. Just don't see it.
It's also worth mentioning he's so young. Dudley brings up a great point. He says Magnum would have still been in his 30s when the NWO started and the Attitude Era kicked off. Where do you think he would have fit in? I mean, he would have been right at the top, right, with Brett.
Well, yeah, I don't understand what this. What do you think his fit in shit is? What do people think?
I think
he's a top guy, for God's sakes. He's a star.
Right.
You can't manufacture them. You can't go pluck them out of trees or dig them up in the ground and harvest them. He's a top guy that comes along once in a generation, if that. So he would have fit in anywhere they did pro wrestling. Had a goddamn brain bigger than the Black Eyed Pea. Promise you. He was that big. And a lot of people now are asking these questions because they unfortunately, or fortunately, whatever your perspective, weren't around in his heyday. Just go back and research it. There's plenty of footage. Peacock's got stuff. I'm sure YouTube's got stuff. There's all kinds of Magnum TA things out there. But yeah, man, he was that good. He just was that good. He just had a short run.
Right.
That a lot of people missed, because of their age and so forth.
Last one, and this is an interesting one. Mike wants to know, would a Magnum TA run on top for Jim Crockett potentially altered the trajectory of that company? Or do you still think, successful or not, the company would have ran into the same financial issues?
Well, if the accounting didn't change wholeheartedly and how they did their books, it ain't going to matter. Magnum getting over or not, they might have more money to blow. But until the deficiencies and the infrastructure was corrected, you're still going to run into those issues. But let's not confuse this whole issue here too, either, Conrad. Terry Allen was not going to be the savior. It wasn't a one-man problem in Crockett.
Right.
And to think that one man's success is going to trump the incumbent king of the jungle in WWF, we're wrong. The WWF is still going to be the king of the jungle. And because what you do is you go out, you see this guy that's helping keep these other boys alive on life support because he's the only thing they got that's really over. What you do, you go buy him. You write checks. Well, I have character. You're a wrestler. Horse shit. You want a payday. Well, I love the game. I've always wanted to be a wrestler. As a little kid, I had a little army man and I had him fight. First action figure. It's great. You want the money. And that's what Magnum would have said at the end of the day. Wife, family, his future. What do? You die on your sword and say, I'm too big a company man and I'm not going to deviate from my beliefs? Or do you take the largest contract anybody's ever floated in front of you, sign the contract, and start putting lots of money in the bank? I think we all know the answer to that.
Well, we're going to have some questions and some answers next week on King of the Ring 1996. And Jim, in the meantime, I think I'm going to go fire up the grill, whip out some of my new shipment from jrsbbq.com, and we're going to have some supper around these parts. What do you got going on over at jrsbbq.com these days?
Well, we always have a lot of specials, and we have different packages almost every day. We're extremely close. I cooked all last week. No, it was the week before last with the new seasoning, which is going to be so close to the old seasoning. I don't think anybody's going to be able to tell the difference, but I wanted to make it a little bit healthier, and it's got great flavor. So I'm going to cook this week. Been cooking this week, thanks to our friends at Omaha Steaks, and I'm doing some things with them and using our seasoning. But I think it's going to be a great addition to our lineup, and a new player, same basic taste, good packaging, the whole 9 yards. So that should be ready in. I think they told me we had to have 2 weeks to get the labels done. So we're very close now. We have tasted it. It exists. It's not a figment of anybody's imagination. It's just a matter that we need to do the due diligence of the labels, and all the nutritional information has to be on there, thanks to the FDA and all those things. But everything's in stock. The seasoning, or the sauces, ketchup, mustard, all there. Plenty of beef jerky, fresh beef jerky. We sign and sell our books at jrsbbq.com. Not a bad idea for a Father's Day gift. If you want me to sign a book for your father or somebody on your gift list, birthdays, Father's Day, whatever it may be, I'm happy to do it. So we're just pedaling along, Conrad. We're trying to build a business. It's the American dream, man. We talked a lot about Dusty, the American dream. This is my American dream, to build my little condiment company so that someday when I'm not around, it still stays around, and my children can hopefully enjoy the fruits of the old man's labor. So business is good. jrsbbq.com, and we'll always offer you good customer service. If you don't, just let me know, because it'll be fixed. I promise you. So it's good. Business is good. We're steady, and like you said, it's grilling time. And the only negative thing about living in this condo here on the beach is I can't have a grill outside. Bad. That's why I enjoy now. I'm back to Oklahoma more, because I got an outdoor kitchen there, and I can cook outside all at once. So plus those 3 sooner September home football games, it's another piece of encouragement for me to ease back west from the Jacksonville. So it's good though. But the business has been good, and it's just a steady growth. And we're trying new things. We got the mugs, those Moscow Mule mugs we have are beautiful. The etchings on them are really cool, classy, great gift ideas as well. So we got that and so much more. And as I always say here, it doesn't cost you anything to go look. jrsbbq.com. Take a look. Look at the site. It's not like it's Amazon. You can go through it pretty quick. So
right.
Check it out, and let us serve you up some good groceries.
Hit it up, jrsbbq.com. Leave us a 5-star review if you think we've earned it, and tell a friend about your new favorite wrestling podcast. It's Grilling JR every Thursday here on Cumulus Podcasts, and we're excited to be back next week talking all things King of the Ring 1996 with the voice of wrestling, Mr. Jim Ross.
Thanks, Conrad. Thanks, everybody. Have a great week. We appreciate you tuning in.
And oh yeah, heavy on the mister, right? Come on, give it to me, Jim.
Heavy on the mister. Don't make me come through your set. I will bash your ass.
See you next week, folks.
Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell so you get a notice anytime we upload some new content. And go save yourself some money right now. If you're in a 30-year loan or you have credit card debt, it's not a matter of if I can save you money. It's a matter of how much. Find out right now for free at savewithconrad.com.